The Philadelphia Eagles have always been a team full of quiet stories behind the scenes, but not every piece of news arrives loudly or with flashing lights. Some things surface almost in silence, like a whisper shared among executives, scouts, and front office people, and when the fan finally connects the dots, something that once felt finished suddenly feels alive again. The news starting to circulate right now has exactly that tone, because it involves the possibility that a familiar face, someone who has already worn this uniform, might be closer to a return than most people realize. What makes this situation even more interesting is that it does not come from panic, public pressure, or a disastrous season. It comes from the one area the Eagles have always treated as sacred, even when everything seems fine on the surface: the offensive line. The place fans might not be staring at right now, but where the organization never stops looking. Because in Philadelphia, the future rarely starts in the spotlight. It starts in the trenches. Once you begin to connect the information, the picture becomes clearer. This is not just about a player who might be available. It is not just about a cheap signing. This is about context, recent history, contracts quietly reaching their end, depth slowly thinning out. And when all of that comes together, the idea of a reunion stops sounding like empty speculation and starts feeling like something that fits perfectly with how this franchise actually operates. That is where Mekhi Becton enters the conversation. A player whose NFL career has never followed a straight line. Drafted with massive expectations, labeled early as a potential dominant force, but over the years forced to battle injuries, inconsistency, and constant change. And yet, interestingly enough, Philadelphia turned out to be one of the few places where he found real stability and solid production. After his time with the Eagles, Becton signed a meaningful contract with the Los Angeles Chargers, a 2-year deal worth $20 million that represented a clear bet on his long-term rebound. The expectation was simple: turn size, strength, and experience into consistent performance. That never fully happened. Pressures allowed piled up, penalties became an issue, and his play quickly raised internal questions within the organization. Now, the possibility of him being released before the end of that contract is very real, and that is exactly where the Eagles re-enter the discussion. Not by accident, not out of sentiment, but out of logic. When you look at the Eagles' offensive line today, the first impression is still a good one. There is talent, there is experience, there is continuity among the starters. But football is not played only by the guys who open the game. Long seasons are survived with depth, versatility, and contingency plans. And that is where the warning light quietly turns on. Several players who have served as reliable backups and rotation pieces are approaching free agency. Brett Toth, Matt Pryor, Fred Johnson. These are not headline names, but they mattered when called upon. Losing them does not create immediate panic, but it does open a dangerous gap just below the surface. A gap that has to be filled with intention, not desperation. Philadelphia has always valued offensive linemen who can play more than one spot. Guards who can slide outside, tackles who understand interior responsibilities, players who do not fall apart when the original plan collapses mid-game. In that specific area, Becton has already shown he can contribute. During his season with the Eagles, he was not just a big body taking up space. He adapted to the system. He understood his role. He functioned inside a very well-coached unit, and context matters here. That season was not just another year. It was a year when the run game reasserted itself, a year when protection allowed the offense to breathe, a year when Saquon Barkley produced at an elite level, fueled by an offensive line that controlled games. That group was a major reason the season ended with a Super Bowl-like title, and even if Becton was not the star, he was part of the machine that kept everything moving. That is why expectations must be framed correctly when talking about a possible return. This would not be a move to hand someone a guaranteed starting job. It would not be a blind redemption story. It would be a calculated decision, with a defined role, controlled risk, and upside if things break right. Of course, the concerns are real. Becton's recent inconsistency cannot be ignored. Injuries over the years, technical lapses, penalties at the worst times, all of that matters. And the Eagles know it. That is exactly why the fit only works if the role is clear. Depth, versatility, insurance. Nothing more than that. When you look at the Eagles' front office history, this type of move is not unusual at all. It is the pattern. How many times have we seen this team take chances on discounted veterans, short contracts, low financial risk situations with meaningful upside? especially along the offensive line, where familiarity and system knowledge often matter as much as raw talent. Looking ahead to 2026, the picture becomes even more compelling. The team will face major decisions in both the draft and free agency. Investing high draft picks in the offensive line is always an option, but that does not eliminate the need for reliable veterans. If anything, it increases it. Offensive line is one of the hardest positions for rookies to master quickly. Having someone experienced, who already understands the building and the expectations, can quietly stabilize an entire season. From a financial perspective, the fit makes sense too. If he is released, Becton is unlikely to command a large contract on the open market. That creates room for a flexible, team-friendly deal that aligns with how the Eagles like to operate. A contract that does not strain the salary cap can be exited cleanly and provides immediate value if it works. From the player's side, the logic is just as clear. Philadelphia has been one of the few places where his role made sense, where expectations were defined, where his strengths were emphasized and his weaknesses protected by the structure around him. Returning to that environment could be his best chance to extend his NFL career, not as a star, but as a trusted professional inside a stable system. All of this leads to a bigger conversation about where the Eagles are right now. This is still a competitive team, but one that can no longer afford to ignore details. The margin for error gets smaller as the roster ages and larger contracts take up more space. Keeping the offensive line deep, prepared, and resilient may be the difference between a strong season and a frustrating one. That is why this quiet piece of news matters. It is not just about a player possibly coming back. It is about roster-building philosophy, identity, how the Eagles view the future of their offensive line, and how much they value continuity and internal knowledge over constant reinvention. So here is the question that really splits the fan base. If this player becomes available on a short, affordable deal, should the Eagles pursue the reunion despite the ups and downs? Or is it finally time to turn the page completely and invest only in youth and internal development? I want to hear what you think. Leave your opinion in the comments because that is what keeps this discussion alive among fans who truly follow the team. If you enjoyed this deeper analysis, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It strengthens the community, keeps the conversation going, and helps the channel continue delivering thoughtful coverage of the present and future of the Philadelphia Eagles.